What is going on, everyone? AP over here, RunPureSports. We are doing the RunPure and Saber office hours. It's just me today. Jordan will be back next week. And we're going to keep doing this. We're going to rotate in different coordinators with different people from over at Saber. And the goal with doing this is just to help all of you out there, help you use the tools that we have, help you, refine and define your process, and then incorporating and using Sabersim to fine tune that. So many of you, I've already done two of these, but we did it in a really kind of small scale. And then one time I did it with BigT as well, where we went through our process. I wanted to do a deep dive into my process. Some of this is going to be very familiar with many of you that have seen those previous shows, but really what this is going to what this is going to do is give you an inside look at kind of what I'm doing on a daily basis with NBA specifically. So if you're familiar with their content, I'm working on the heat map, and you're going to kind of see how I build that, how we build the playbooks, cash chart, all the tools that we have, and how we incorporate that into our process, and then using Sabersim as that final piece to just dial everything in. So if you have any questions that are process related, feel free to drop them in. I'm just going to go though. So we'll get to questions at the end. So dialing in your NBA process, I think having a process, even if it's very simple, is one of the most important things that you can do. It can be as simple as I'm going to watch the Up to Lock show and take notes. That's my process, and then I'm dialing in my builds. That's fine. Just make sure that your process is very defined, so that you can go back if you're ever struggling. It's something that you can review because maybe there's a tweak that you need to make in your process. So this is mine. I always start off by looking at doing what I call a slate preview. I'll do this usually early in the morning. I'll in the site that I use. So Roto Grinders, great site, obviously. I use their starting lineups page, which can be just found right here. It's a free tool. You don't have to spend any money to get there. And I can see very quickly, we have a 7-game slate tonight. I can see it in DraftKings pricing, FanDuel pricing. And then I can see matchups. I can see, okay, we got the Grizzlies, Pistons, Nets, Wizards. And I can just go through here and I can get an idea of who's playing who and what the matchups are. And then if there's any pricing that really stands out. So, obviously Kemba Walker for the Knicks here with RJ Barrett, between him and Burks, it's going to be an interesting situation. So I'll just kind of identify different spots that I think are very interesting, and I'll make note of that. And I'll show you that here in a bit on how I do that. The next thing with NBA specifically, I really like to look at pace and matchups. So matchups we already talked about. Pace, the tool I use very simply going down here is just teamrankings.com. You can go there and you can get an idea of the number of possessions each teams are playing in a game. In NBA DFS, we like to target pace up spots. Injuries and news, obviously, if we're well into the season right now, and today is going to be one of the crazier days in the NBA. Knowing this situation is definitely one of the most vital things that you can do. That's where I believe the edge is generated in NBA DFS right now. You'll hear Mangone talk about all the time, hashtag wait for the news. I'm telling you, last night's slate, so we had a really tasty spot with the Hornets and Bulls. Tight rotations, fast pace. But again, we had a huge gap between that game and then the 3 later games, which we had the Kings Wolves, which was also another really nice spot. And if you would have waited for the news, that ended up being one of the edges that was had in tournaments. So each slate's going to be different, but keeping an eye on the news is important. We get all these questions all the time in Discord, and it's fine, but if you can go and bookmark this site, it's basketballmonster.com. It is their news page. I always click today's players. You're going to see all the games here over on the right-hand side. You're going to see the players that are out. Now, one thing to keep in mind, if we go to the Wizards, Bradley Beal's out for the season. So like they're not going to list him there because he's out for the season. So typically if a player is going to be out for longer than a week or so, they might not be listed here, but just know that obviously they are out. So this is something to keep an eye on. Very, very important when it comes to NBA DFS. And then adjustments. So lastly, with the NBA, when a player gets ruled out, another player obviously benefits from that. You got 5 guys on the court. Either a person that was, someone's going to benefit, like a starter is going to have more usage, more opportunity, and the ability to generate fantasy points, or you're going to have a bench player that moves up and you're going to have an increase in minutes usage and everything. So it creates very nice opportunity. So let me dive in to what I do at the very start of the day. I'll go game by game and I'll just make some really quick notes. So you don't have to do this. You can literally copy the playbook that myself, Glock, Gary, all of us are doing it throughout the week. You literally just copy the notes from the playbook if you want, and maybe add in your own spin to it. So as I said already, injury source that I'm going to, basketballmonster.com. If pace of play is something I'm always looking at, teamrankings.com. It's a free resource. Rotations, something that we are often talking about here at RunPureSports. Toronto, we're going to get into them. They have one of the tastiest rotations in the NBA. If you want to look at a team's rotations, go to popcornmachine.net. That is a free resource where you can do that. So this is today's slate. Now we had some major trade news come in. I don't have all of that factored in because obviously we're getting ready for this show, but some of it obviously it is. So what I will do is, and this looks very similar to probably what the playbook looks like, but I'll just note, Grizzlies are playing the Pistons, Nets, Wizards, Heat, Pelicans, Raptors, Rockets, Clippers, Mavericks. And what I'm going to do is just go game by game. I'm going to list out the injuries here, and then I'm going to make my own notes. So I'm always going to look at, okay, the Grizzlies, they're running 5th in pace on the season. Detroit, surprisingly, they're playing at a faster pace this year relative to what we are accustomed to with that team. So what this tells me is maybe there's some opportunity here. However, we have a big spread. The Grizzlies have been blowing teams out. And in those blowouts, by looking at the rotations, we can see they're running 10-man rotations and blowouts where Tyus Jones, Clark, Slow-Mo, Kyle Anderson, D'Anthony Melton, who has been an absolute stud over the last 6 games, they are working in and taking minutes away from these starters in that situation. So their coach, Jenkins, very sharp coach. He lets this second unit, he'll give them extended minutes. He'll rotate Ja Morant back in, so you'll see one of these guys come out. But it's it's a feel type of thing. But he'll give D'Anthony Melton, Clark, Tyus, extra minutes, which extends the rotation. So how I see this, and then how eventually we will look at Saber and adjust this. I want to know who to bump up and I want to know who to bump down, because I believe when we fine tune everything in Saber that we want to dial in our projections. And what that means for me is I'm adding a personal bias to it. So what I want to do with this game, I want to be very cautious with it. Now, the Pistons did have some news that just dropped with Trey Lyles, who has actually been one of their better players off the bench. He's being traded. Same with Josh Jackson right here. So I have that listed out right there in my own personal notes. This will be an interesting spot because we're still waiting on Cade Cunningham news. This for me is like tournament where we're playing the blowout script, where I want to maybe give D'Anthony Melton, Clark, some of those guys a little bump upwards off their base projection that we have, or Saber has, or any of the sites, whatever projections that you're using. And then, what I might do here is look at, and this is going to be an interesting time because it's the trade deadline. And this day, if we go back year over year, is always crazy. And it's one that I really like because we can do crazy things. So Kelly Olynyk, I think if Kate Cunningham's out, he's a guy that like I could see them running out there for like, 20 minutes or something. And we know if he's out there, he's going to chuck. He's a high usage guy. So what I might do is add him to my list. Like, this doesn't mean I'm playing him. Add him to my list of guys that I might bump. Does that mean he's going to be forced into my lineup? No, I want to see what happens when we use then, if I bump his projection off of what we have the average at, I want to see how that impacts my other lineups. So the other thing that I like to do is just color code things. So orange for me means it's a risky spot. Blowout is a risk here. One that I don't know if I want to be overweight on for DFS wise. Nets, Wizards, a game where, the Wizards are running at a slower pace, bad defensively though. The Nets running at a faster pace, also bad defensively. So this is going to be a game that I have a ton of interest in and want to target. So the Wizards over their last few games, they've been kind of a disappointment. Kyle Kuzma has been someone that people have often been tilting in Discord. Such a good get right spot for Kuzma here. Same with Dinwiddie. I think this game is going to be, while it's not like the highest total on the slate, I think it's going to be a fantastic game to target for DFS purposes. So I'm going to just make a quick note here. I'm going to bump up Kyrie Irving. He's going to have to be a stud today. I'm going to bump up Dinwiddie and Kuzma. I also have interest in stacks, and I have my run backs listed right here. So I'm just literally going real quickly. It doesn't take me long at all, going game by game, noting injuries, and then making a quick note about pace, and then adding my own little bias to it to get an idea of what games I want to target and which games I want to fade. So a good example here with the Heat Pelicans, a game that I'm not very high on at all today. The Heat, both these teams are running at slower paces. You can see right here, I have that noted. And we know the Heat are one of the more elite defensive teams in the league. So I'm going to bump down all of the players in this game or completely fade it entirely. So Raptors, this is where we talk about rotations all the time. Not the fastest in pace, but they are playing the third, the team that ranks third in pace to play. That means they get a positive bump up in pace, meaning that this game is going to be played at a faster pace. The one thing we love about the Raptors, obviously, very tight rotation. So common theme, what you're going to hear from myself, other people, other coordinators, is pace, injuries, projections, usage. Those are the terms in NBA DFS that you really want to have dialed in and understand and should be a part of your process. So I'm not going to go through every single game. However, I do think the Knicks, and we're going to discuss this later, obviously, in the Hardwood show, but really interesting spot here for the Knicks. And then I do think this Bucks-Suns game could be very interesting. Obviously, a rematch from the NBA Finals from last year where Giannis just absolutely dominated. So I'm going to make these notes. I'm going to put them aside. And what I'm going to do is monitor news throughout the day. And while I'm doing that, the next thing I will do is I will be working on the heat map. So throughout the day, working on the heat map, another tool that you could be using. So if you don't have the time to make these notes yourself, use our resources, use the cash chart, use the playbook, copy paste, have a Word document open, have whatever, a notebook, make notes, make that a part of your process. It's going to help you out. It's going to help your results and everything. But the one thing about the heat map and how I use it with Saber is you'll see here, I don't have any highlights obviously yet. We have a lot of news that we are waiting on this slate, but this will typically align with how I am manually adjusting projections up to lock. So you'll see here the core plays tagged in green, ones that I really like. Donovan Mitchell was my favorite play last night. Blowout got me. I mean, what can I say? He was on his way to a triple-double, which you never see him doing, and he got pulled early in the fourth, and they just absolutely destroyed the Warriors. So it is what it is. It happens. But you'll see here in this first game, I try to, I don't want to be on Jaren Jackson. I don't want to be on some of the Grizzly starters. I have more interest in kind of the backup guys in tournaments if you're multi-entering only, playing on that blowout script. And but you can go here. You can see a breakdown of the slate, which games are starting at what point, or at various different points throughout the slate. And you could adjust it accordingly. So you could even use that, pull up a different tab, and then you can use Saber and you can manually adjust this yourself, or watch the shows and have Saber up at the same time and manually adjust it. I'll keep hitting on it over and over. Having a process is definitely one of the most important things, and then adding bias to the projections, and then dialing it in Saber, I think is absolutely huge. So let me show you how I do that now. So just going back to the notes here. So we've done our preview. We've looked at pace. We've looked at matchups. We've looked at injuries and news. We are now organized. So we have our own cheat sheet built, where we, maybe you disagree with me and you want to avoid a player I'm on. Put that down. Like, you're not going to hurt my feelings. Maybe you want to disagree with any of us. Take stands though and feel good about that. The more you can do that, the better it's going to be for you over the long haul. Now we're reviewing projections. We're adding our personal bias to it, and then we're dialing it in with Sabersim. So this partnership is just phenomenal, and it's awesome. And I use it honestly. I'm super random with NBA. I'm a field player, and like, if you're a tournament player, I'm telling you right now, with NBA, with how sharp projections are, there's going to be a lot of tough nights out there. But I know over the long haul, I'm going to have some really nice wins to go along with it. So some nights will be MME. Some nights I'll be, a 3-max player. Some other nights I'll be focused on, like the 888 last night. That's what I was focused on. Just missed the cash line, but I was more focused on that tournament. Tonight, I like the $88 $20K to first. I'm going to be looking at 10 to 15 builds in that. Also maybe looking at maybe doing a 20 max style with that. So that's how I'm building today, and that's how I'm going to incorporate it into my process. But this not final step, but almost final step, dialing it in with Saber is definitely the fun part. So I always, pull your note sheet up, put it to the side. We go back through game by game, or when you're watching the shows, pull this up, go game by game. So we already talked about it here. One thing too, that's a default setting in here to keep in mind. This is always set at 15. I always just change it to 5. You can keep it 15, but I want to, since the player pool I load is always going to be the heat map player pool, I want to make sure I'm not missing anyone. And so I will go through here and I'll manually look at everyone to make sure it aligns with what I want. So today, honestly, am I going to play Tyus Jones? He may land in the lineup. I mean, I do like the blowout script in this game. I haven't made any formal or final decisions because there could be some news that drops late, a massive trade that opens up a 3.4K guy that is just we don't have to take the risk of playing, a blowout script. So always keep that in mind as it pertains to right now with the news that we have right now. I don't hate the idea of playing a blowout script, but I'm just, telling you up to lock though, with the more news that comes out, I don't know if that's going to be the final place that I land with my build. So I'll go through here, and I want to be a little under on the starters. John Morant, I always just leave him alone. John Morant's just always a guy that can always break a slate. So I want to leave him alone. I do want to be under on Jaren Jackson. I do want to be under on Desmond Baines. Steven Adams, I'm probably just going to leave him alone. I've historically this season been under on him, but man, there have been times where he's absolutely broken a slate. So I'm going to be right maybe between us and Saber. So you can see the projections right there. Sabersim is SS, RPS obviously is us. So I'm just going to leave that alone. What do we do now? So, okay. Brandon Clark, Melton. I want to give them a little bumps. Nothing too crazy, but I just want to give them a little bit of a bump here, just so that when the simulations are running, that they're going to look at them a little bit more, because we've seen DeAnthony Melton over the last 6 games. He has a ceiling of over 40 fantasy points. So I want to make sure that we are giving him at least a look You could do the same with Kyle Anderson. Not really too high on Zara Williams. I think we're going to have some better value there. I'll just for now leave him alone. And then Tyus Jones, we'll just give him a little bit of a bump as well. So all we're doing here is just adding a little bit of a personal touch, a little bit of a bias to this. We'll go to the Detroit side. We'll do the same thing. Honestly, I don't see myself ever like Cade has been questionable, then he continues to get ruled out. The price tag hasn't come down at all. Tougher matchup here against the Grizzlies, a team that does play good defense. I'm just going to probably take him out or reduce him down. I don't really want to play Jeremy Grant as well. So here's where I'm removing a bunch of guys like Sadiq Bey. I mean, I'll leave him alone. Josh Jackson, Trey Lyles, etc. They're going to be out. So I'll just leave him alone. He's been a guy that has shown some upside. Then Kelly Olynyk, one of the guys, obviously, now projections are getting onto him. So I don't think he's going to end up being too sneaky, but I want to make sure that I'm really factoring him into my final lineup decisions. And so I'm going to give him a really nice bump relative to where we're at. And the thing I'm going to do is throughout the day. So now that I've made my own personal adjustment here or custom adjustment here, it's not going to adjust with the news. So make sure you are pressing this button, update projections throughout the slate up to lock. And then, on a guy like him, I'm going to come back here and I'm going to look to see if, maybe someone else got ruled out and now Kelly Olynyk is starting. We don't have that information yet, but maybe he is. Now this could say like 28 or 29, and maybe we want to be 31 or 32. Kelly Olynyk is a guy that could just come out and do nothing or come out and put up like 38, 40 fantasy points. So definitely a value that we want to consider on a crazy slate like today. Then some of these other guys, like most of the time, like I don't want to like Corey Joseph, the price tag is like way up there. Again, tougher matchup. I'll be fine just removing some of these guys from the player pool. Frank Jackson, another value that if I landed on him, it would be fine. He's been playing about 24 to 25 minutes. So maybe we'll give him a bump. Like I'm not in love with him, but I don't necessarily want to just take him out of the player pool in case there's a build that comes up that looks really good with him. So I'll go through here. Let's land on the spots that let's kind of high level overview, hit on the spots that we talked about early in our notes that we really like. So we really like Kyrie Irving here, obviously. So good matchup. Fine. He's going to have all the usage tonight. The one thing with getting some of these higher priced players into your builds, you got to give them a nice projection bump based off of where they are at. At 10-4, I don't think, if we have a 46 projection on him, I don't think he's going to hit a lot of builds. So if you want Kyrie exposure, you got to bump him up quite a bit. We talked about the run backs on the Wizards side. Love Kuzma. I know. Get ready to tilt in Discord. I know. I've been hearing it, the past three or four times he's played. Such a good get right spot. He's going to be able to get whatever he wants against the Nets here. So I'm going to give him a really nice bump. I want to make sure that he's going to be in a high percentage of my builds. I like the Dinwiddie correlation stack too. And then, Montrez, obviously. So like Thomas Bryant, Montrez, both of these guys could obviously smash. We've seen better, more consistent production out of Trez. So I'll give him a little bit of a bump. And honestly, at 3-3, if we left him alone, he's going to hit a ton of builds. So maybe we just give him a slight bump down. It doesn't mean we don't like him. I just, I want to see a little bit of a difference between those guys. And then the role players on the Wizards side, honestly, I'll probably end up I'm going to just uncheck a bunch of these guys. I don't want, maybe if Aaron Holiday ends up into my lineups, I'll get a little bit of him. KCP, raw scoring type of guy. I could see him, having a good game, but it really comes down to him hitting shots. So that's where upside is really correlates to shooting. And they have a deep rotation around their two main guys in Kyle Kuzma and Dinwiddie. So I want to make sure Dinwiddie, Kuzma are the guys that are over projected, and the role players here, I want to make sure they're under projected or eliminated. Now we talked about it. We want to be off of the Heat and Pelicans. So what do we do? I'm just, I don't know if I'll end up like this for the slate, but if I'm like running low on time, I'm gonna cross them off. We can just do that. We talked about Toronto rotations that we absolutely like. I'm gonna bump up Siakam again. Like Siakam continues to be a guy that is just under projected. The other guy I like, Gary Trent. I think this is going to be a game where Gary Trent gets up a ton of shots. We talked about bumping him. The Boucher here, I think, is interesting. So Boucher, if I went back to my notes, I highlighted, man, this could be a spot against Houston where if the Raptors get going, like I could see Boucher playing, some good basketball in this slate. And we saw it last night. So Hassan Whiteside came off the bench and put up a 50 piece. I'm not saying Boucher and him are the same type of player. What I'm saying though is both of them have nice upside. So if they get the time and if they're playing and in rhythm. So like I might give Boucher. It doesn't mean I'm going to play him. I might give him a little bump just to see if he lands in any build. So we'll do that with our Toronto guys. KPJ, I think, was the one guy I had some interest in as a run back. And then Sengun was another guy I had a little bit of interest in. Not a ton of interest here with Christian Wood starting with Sengun. If I went back to my notes, I would see there that his kind of floor and ceiling has been capped with the rotation that he has and with playing alongside, starting alongside Sengun. The other thing about the Rockets, if I went back to my notes, they got a really bad rotation for DFS. So like I would honestly probably go through here and uncheck guys like KJ Martin. I'd be fine with that because I know we have value pieces elsewhere that we want. Clippers, I'm just gonna do that. I'm gonna X them out. The Mavs, the only guy here, if I went back to my notes, Luka, the Don. I don't want to play any of these other guys, so I'm gonna just uncheck them. Not gonna have any exposure. I don't like that game at all. But Luka, much like Ja Morant, I don't want to eliminate him from my pool because it's Luka. He could always get it done for us. So I'm just going to go through here and we'll piece this together just to keep moving along. The interesting spot that I'm really excited to talk through tonight with the guys is Burks, Kemba. For now, I do feel more confident about Burks, but I do think there can be some arguments that are made with Kemba. So for now, just to keep it simple, I'm going to go with what we know in it, that Burks is going to get the start. Kemba too, but Burks has been steadily in there minutes-wise with the Knicks. So the other guy too that should get a bump with RJ Barrett out is Randall. So we won't mess with it too much now. We'll just leave that alone. Then the other thing too is Giannis. I want to make sure Giannis has a fair projection in most games that are going to be competitive. So JSU mentioned it the last time Giannis played against the Lakers. So when you want to play Giannis is when the game is going to project to be very competitive. So we get a matchup against the Suns. Suns are actually favored in this one, and they're playing some incredible ball. So I want to give Giannis a fair projection just to see where he lands. And then over here on the Suns, man, I like Devin Book over CP3 tonight. So what I'm going to do is be a little under on CP3. I'm going to bump Dev up. I think Dev needs to have an MVP type of game to get it done here in this spot. And then the other thing too is DeAndre Ayton. He's 6'6". He's going to need to play heavy minutes. They need size against the Bucks. So we can give Ayton a bump up. My one concern and why I don't want to go all in on a guy like Ayton is they have JaVale McGee now. And I'm really curious to watch this game tonight, to watch this matchup, to see what they do because they need size. They need athleticism against this Bucks team in tournaments. I mean, man, JaVale McGee has shown some upside. I don't know if I'm going to play him, but I'm going to give him a little bit of a bump because I do think he has a bigger role here. So what we've done now is we've taken our notes. we've dialed it into Saber. Not entirely. Obviously, I'm going to go. This is a rough draft version. Now we're going to dial in our builds. And sometimes this process, I'll be honest, it takes me a couple times. I'll do this. I'll go through the step 2 process. I won't necessarily like what I see, or I'll want to be like, maybe I forgot someone, or I want to maybe I'm getting too much of a player. I'll revisit step 1, and then I'll just go through that process real quickly again and make some adjustments. So what to do with the settings here? I'm still, I'll be honest, like I'm still perfecting this, and I'm still, dialing this in, and it's going to be sport specific, but I'm still testing different things for myself. If you want to just use the default settings that they have, perfect. Go in here, whatever contest you're in, 20. So we talked 20 max. I'm probably going to be targeting one that's right around here, maybe a little bit more. It's a tournament, so we can see the settings in here. I always adjust this. In NBA, I don't like leaving like a ton of salary, and so I'm going to change it to 49,400. If you were doing like a 50,000 entry type of contest, you could definitely change that as well. Well, let's just go with their settings here, and let's just pool 500. You can go up to 1,500 if you want. That's fine, but just to keep things simple, let's go 500. Now we're making our build. So if you've been following along, and if you've seen the other office hours that we've had, or the other Saber videos that we've had, obviously you're very, very familiar with this process. So yeah, here we go. Here is the top builds that we see. One thing I'll do is I'll look at my ownership here, and obviously we over projected Kelly Olynyk, so we're going to get a lot of Kelly Olynyk. Maybe we don't want him in every build. What we could do is change the max exposure. Let's just change it to 80%, and that's gonna change him. That's just gonna give us 80% of him in our build, and then obviously other changes are made. So now it's wanting to lock in Thomas Bryant, Gary Trent, etc. These are things that you can play around with to fine tune your overall exposure, what players you want to give bumps to, what players that you want to bump down. The other way to do it too is, okay, I don't want 100% Thomas Bryant. We've projected him a little bit too much. Let's just take him down all the way to in the 20s. Now he's going to be down here. There we go, 20%. That might be a little bit better depending on how much exposure that we want to Thomas Bryant. So a few other things that I will do as well. We talked about, so if I went back to my note sheet, let me just bring it up real quick. So I talked about the Nets Wizards, a game I want exposure to. I talked about the Raptors, a team I want exposure to in an awesome spot against the Rockets. I talked about a little bit about the Knicks, and then obviously the studs from this game. So I'm going to have those games, those teams on my mind. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at team stacks. I want to see what teams I have the most exposure to. So in all my builds, I have some exposure to all of the spots that I pretty much want, except for the Nets there. So I can already see if I really want Nets in a run back there, I'm going to have to make some adjustments to the projections. I'm not going to do that now to save on time. But at least I know that I'm going to have to make some adjustments there because I have a ton of the Wizards. I have a ton of the Raptors, which I want. I have the Suns. And now what I'll do is I want to see in this game, I want to see who I'm getting. So I can see right there, I probably have a ton of JaVale McGee, ton of Devin Booker. And the one guy I'm not seeing that I'll probably, want to have in consideration tonight is Giannis. So all that comes down to now is going back through and refining the projections, adding, readjusting a little bit of bias to them. So this, again, is a high-level overview. And honestly, if it's like a 3 max day for me, or like if I'm only building 1 through 5, I'll use this to fine-tune my build. Like I'll go in here and I'll see, okay, I want to see what my Boucher lineups look like. So I'll highlight that. And I love this tool because now I can see the top-rated Boucher lineups. since I've made so many adjustments to the projection, maybe instead of Saber score, I just want to see what the highest projected lineups are. I can do that right here by adjusting that. So really cool tool here. Let me just check. So I was just going to look at one other thing that you can do is, so Boucher, risky guy, obviously. Maybe we don't want Kelly Olynyk in there. Now we can negative highlight Kelly Olynyk. It's going to bring up the builds that we have, just 2 of them, whereas only Boucher and not Kelly Olynyk. You could do that the same too with Kelly O and Boucher. Obviously, I don't know if I'm going to play these guys at all. I just think that they were interesting discussion points for this educational series today. Yeah, so that's a very high level overview of my process. And it's something I'm still working on fine tuning. It's not perfect yet, but it's something that works for me. You know, kind of to wrap up that part of the segment is define what your process is, write it down, stick to it, and master it. And if you do that, you're going to start to see far more success. Let me just see if I don't think we have any questions. I don't have the YouTube chat up, but again, we're going to keep this short and simple. We have the Hardwood show coming up at 3:30 or 3:45, like we do each and every day. We're going to have the Up the Lock show after that. Tons of other content coming out. Okay, looks like we got one question. Do you bump RPS projections for certain players or bump Saber projections? So, I mean, honestly, I'm going to take a look at both sets of projections, and then I'm going to bump it to what I feel. So and that's just because I'm watching. I mean, I'm literally, analyzing this every day. So I'm going to add a lot of personal bias to that. If you're not able to watch the games, the players, rotations, all of that, trust more on the projections. So make less manual adjustments, or when you're watching the shows, watching the or reviewing the content, make your adjustments based on that. Maybe BigT late says he likes a certain player, bump that person up, or consider locking them in using the different tools in Saber, using the lock button tool. That's something that you can do, and you could run a build very quickly. So there's a lot that you can do, even if you don't feel that you have all of the knowledge in a sport. Use us for that and add some personal bias to it. Define your process, stick to it, and I think that you're going to find that you have a lot more success when building when you're building your lineup. So again, if anyone ever has any questions about fine tuning their process, never hesitate to send me a message. I'd love to look at what you're doing up to lock, see if there's anything that you could be doing. Post lock adjustments, we don't have the time to go into that today. That is going to be something that we'll continue to cover with Jordan. So this just means after that first game locks, what are we doing with late swap? With late swap. So that's going to be something that we continue to hammer and hit on moving forward. But today I wanted to focus on my process to help you better define what your process is. Hopefully this helps everyone out there. Again, if you have any questions and relates to process, never hesitate to post a message in chat or send me a DM. With that, Simon, you can get us out of here.